You're the new hunter assigned to Moga Village. As a monster hunter, your job is to cull the large monsters that encroach in the surrounding areas to keep the village and its inhabitants safe. Moga Village has recently been experiencing terrible earthquakes. The village elder suspects it's a vicious monster known as the Lagia Cruise, but could it be something more sinister? Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate is the ultimate edition of Monster Hunter Tri. It's an HD remaster with additional content. More monsters, more weapon types, a revamped gunner system to more closely resemble the rest of the games, and an entirely new difficulty level. Monster Hunter is a series where you gather materials from the environment by mining, catching bugs, and just picking stuff up off the ground. Then you hunt giant monsters, carve their parts, and use it to make weapons and armor so you can hunt other gianter monsters. It's hard to describe Monster Hunter as anything other than that, and it makes it sound really boring. Grinding in general is not a fun mechanic, and Monster Hunter is made up almost entirely of it. The difference is that the vast majority of the content in Monster Hunter is, strictly speaking, boss fights. Just straight up boss fights. You versus a large monster, or a few large monsters. Monsters all have telegraphed attacks and recognizable patterns. This means most of the game is about positioning and knowing when and where you can get attacks in. 3 Ultimate, along with Tri, are the only Monster Hunter games that feature underwater combat. The underwater combat is not as enjoyable for most of the weapon types. Any ranged weapon excels underwater due to its range, which adds safety, and they all have reasonable damage output. Lances continue to do well as they have good mobility underwater and the ability to block most attacks with a good skill set. A lot of the other Blade Master weapons simply suffer when you go underwater. It's much harder to judge distances and dodge in the appropriate direction. Leviathan class monsters, the only ones that you'll fight underwater, are also extremely fast and mobile and much deadlier than when on land. The underwater combat is something you'll either be indifferent to or hate. You will get used to it, but for most players it's not going to be something you're going to be excited about when you see a quest with the water-based monster. If you're really struggling underwater, try out a lance. It's like night and day. The single player is good, but Monster Hunter really shines when you're hunting online. Up to 4 players can take on various monsters in 3 separate difficulty levels. These are gated, so you need to work your way up through the low ranks to reach the final rank, G. Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate is an HD remaster of Tri for the Wii. It does look a little last gen, but it's nothing to lose sleep over. The 16:9 aspect ratio and improved resolution makes it significantly more pleasing to the eye than Tri ever was. If you're playing on 3DS, there are noticeable downgrades to the graphics while playing, but that's the concession you take for the ability to take it anywhere in your pocket. There's no voice acting to speak of besides your hunter's grunts and groans when they're hit by monsters. This is customizable, as is the rest of your character, but the vast majority of it isn't noticeable. Once you get your first armor set, all your customization options are usually totally obscured. The music is good overall. Some monsters have a unique theme like Zinogre, which will play regardless of the location you fight it. Other monsters simply get a generic level theme, which does feel a little underwhelming at times. The controls will feel exceptionally clunky when you first start playing. It does have a learning curve, mostly related to how the interfaces work and getting used to things like sheathing and unsheathing your weapon. You do have a lot of control options, including the Wii U gamepad, which features some customization options. You can also use Wii Pro controllers for when your Wii U gamepad inevitably runs out of battery power. This clunkiness in the control scheme extends to a lot of the systems in the game. Even though 3 Ultimate has an extended tutorial, they don't explain everything to you. For things like armor skills, it's not readily apparent what they do. You need to hit a break point to activate the skill. For instance, 9 points in attack does nothing. Once you hit 10 points in attack, you get attack up S activated, which provides you additional raw damage to your weapon. Even then, some skills are just unclear as to what they do based on their name. These are things you'll have to figure out on your own or learn via the very comprehensive wikis on the internet. Don't be one of those guys online with a million different points and skills, but 0 actually active. 3 Ultimate has a great feature in that if you own both the 3DS and Wii U version, you can easily transfer your saves from one platform to the other using a simple app on the 3DS. It's an amazing feature as you can take your save file away while you're traveling, then once you get home you can transfer the save back with all your gained progress and play on the glorious big screen. It's a great feature, and it's a shame that more games don't use this kind of functionality. There really isn't a huge story in Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, and it's never really been a selling point of the series. The flavor text for quests can be fun, but usually all you care about is Hunt X. 3U and Try did push a bit more of a narrative, and it works mostly because it's pretty light and unobtrusive. High Rank adds a new narrative, but it's mostly a Moby Dick, White Whale kind of story rather than the slightly more unique and fleshed out narrative in Low Rank. The difficulty in Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate is difficult to judge. Unlike Try, where you start naked, you do actually start with a leather armor set. This set gives you improved gathering skills and relieves a bit of the early game frustrations of pickaxes and bug nets breaking too often. The tutorial does a good job teaching you the basics, but once it's finished, you're on your own. Your first large monsters can be a struggle if you don't know what's what. Once you understand how the game works, get good fundamentals from practice, and have some monster hunts under your belt, the game is actually pretty easy. You'll reach a point where you're able to reliably hunt whatever the game throws at you with minimal issues. This is especially true if you abuse consumables like crazy. You can bring so many healing items into a quest that you can be extremely careless during a hunt and still be successful. Try and 3 Ultimate also have more accurate hitboxes and lower health pools on monsters, which makes them easier than previous Monster Hunter games, making it a good start for new players to the series. The game's difficulty does ramp up appropriately, giving you progressively harder monsters at a reasonable pace. Obviously, you start in low rank, and it's your introduction and training level. You learn the monsters at their weakest and slowest. Then, once you clear low rank, you move to high rank. High rank monsters can gain new attacks and are more deadly with higher damage and faster speeds. The jump from low rank to high rank is pretty staggering and represents a much higher jump than anything else in the game. You gain access to new equipment to compensate for the increased difficulty, but you have to build it first, which means using low rank gear in high rank quests. And finally there's G, which is the happening spot. G has the best gear, the most monsters, and is by far and wide the most difficult, but also where the majority of the player base resides. The jump from high rank to G isn't as large as the jump from low rank to high rank, but that initial hump can be pretty eye-opening. The length of Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, and really any Monster Hunter game, is going to be dependent entirely on you. How quickly you can adapt to the systems in place, how fast you can learn monster patterns, how fast you can grind out rare materials, how many times you want to hunt the same monster for gear. These are things that are going to affect your playtime. The credits roll after completion of low rank village in the same fashion as Monster Hunter Try, and a secondary set of credits roll after high rank village. Low rank will be anywhere from about 12 to 20 hours depending on how much grinding you do and if you're experienced or not with the game. You can fly through with minimal equipment if you're skilled, which will reduce your playtime significantly by avoiding grinding for armor sets and weapons. High rank will be around the same amount of time, but usually on the higher end as it does feature monsters with higher health pools, making fights longer. The port quests are where things get really muddy. You can do the port quests solo, but they are balanced for about 2 to 3 people. Of course, you can bring 4 people into the hunts, which greatly increases your damage output. Doing these quests solo will take a lot longer than trashing monsters with 4 players online. There are no achievements, but you do have a guild card and a slew of challenges to complete. These can be a nice deviation, but you shouldn't try too hard to complete it as it requires a massive time investment. Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate is great because there's virtually no fluff. You fight the large monsters, you get the loot, you make new gear, you fight more monsters. Make whatever gear you want. Make G-level equipment for weapon types you don't even like using. You can easily put in over 100 hours just because it's fun to hunt the monsters, either online or offline. Even being around 6 years old, there is still a fairly active user base and you will be able to reliably find hunting parties online. It's much smaller than at release, but you can always go to forums or message boards to find some people to play online with you. Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate is a great game. It's unapologetic for what it is, which is a game where you gather anything you can get your grubby little paws on and hunt giant monsters to turn them into sweet armor and weapons. It can be repetitive fighting the same monsters over and over again. There is definitely reasonable diversity in the monsters you fight as well as the weapons you can use, which provides a lot of replay value. The main campaign is pretty reasonable, but it's more of an excuse to give you progressively stronger monsters to fight rather than a tight narrative. Most players won't like the underwater hunting, but it does add some variety and it can be a nice deviation at times. The improved HD textures on Wii U and the ability to take it on the go with your 3DS if you own both versions are amazing features. Monster Hunter does have a bit of a barrier to entry, but 3 Ultimate is a great starting point for anyone interested in the series with a fairly robust tutorial and generally easier monsters. Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate gets recommended playing's most prestigious verdict of recommended.